Hello, and welcome, and thank you both for being here.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Got my hair done and everything.
Our panel this afternoon is on the impact of AI on the future, and both of you are working in areas that could have a really big impact overall on humanity and AI's outcomes. So I really want to start there in terms of what you're doing and some of your thoughts in your current fields. So Mike Abelson, we've got two mics up here, so I'm going to be a little formal and do your first name, last name. Mike Abelson. Michal Aram talked a little bit about self-driving cars, ride sharing, how your view is that this will lead to purpose-built vehicles, specialized vehicles for particular purposes. And I was wondering if you could give a little bit more color to that and some examples.
I think, there are a lot of very creative people that work in the automotive industry, engineering and designing vehicles. But whenever you lay out a vehicle, the first thing you do is position the driver and the driver controls. And what autonomous vehicles or driverless vehicles will do is lift one of the major constraints on how we design vehicles. And I think you'll just see an explosion of creativity around vehicles. And I think it's very similar to the very first automobiles. The very first horseless carriages looked a lot like carriages. But cars today don't look anything like carriages. And I think you'll see that same dynamic play out with autonomous vehicles just a whole lot more quickly.
And Mike Capps, your work historically has been in video games, obviously with Epic Games, but recently it's been more centered in AI. Can you tell us a little bit about the link between video games and AI and what led you to AI?
Well, sure. I mean, cars are great, but video games are the true expression of artificial intelligence.
We could have a discussion.
Perhaps we would disagree. In developing AI and trying to create a compelling entertainment experience, it's absolutely crucial to not just have monsters running around creating emergent behavior. Right? Our goal is instead to understand what they're doing, and we'd always have a big flag over the bad guy's head saying, I'm running for cover, I'm joining my friends, or whatever, so we could create a great experience. And it kind of ticks me off that we have that level of understandability and explanation in video game AI, but not in cars, not in loan programs, right? So that's what got me back in.
And obviously, we couldn't have this panel and you on this panel without talking a little bit about Fortnite. So I was wondering if you have any predictions. Is it the wave of the future? How does Fortnite play out over time?
Well, if you haven't played Fortnite yet, you will. And I hear the next Fortune event will be held in Fortnite. So the team has done something amazing. I never could have imagined it would be that.
AI has been compared to fire in terms of the impact it could have on humanity. And I guess I'm wondering, what are some of the most profound examples each of you foresee or predict in terms of what AI could bring?
Well, writing video games is nice, but making real products is what matters. I think, and I don't want to keep going back to the same topic, but autonomous vehicles will be very transformative technology. It'll impact not just our industry, obviously. It'll impact how cities are arranged. It'll impact where people live, how they live. We don't use AI just to use AI inside of autonomous vehicles, but there are many applications where we use AI modules to help us. And at least in my industry, that is going to be the biggest change in the last 100 years.
Agree with everything you say for that little small amount of time. Well, I think fire is a great metaphor based on how long it took me to fly into Aspen, because fire here is highly regulated, and two idiots using illegal fire in the wrong way, having fun, completely destroyed how many hundreds of thousands of acres of forest and caused how much damage, right? I think that's an allegory. I'm not going to draw the line between those. I think everybody knows where I'm going with that.
So there's good outcomes, bad outcomes. We also talked a little bit in preparation about the fact that AI can really be divided into near future outcomes and far future outcomes. And while it might be hard to predict where AI goes in the far future, what are some of the near future immediate impacts that you see of the way AI is being applied in your fields or more broadly?
You think cars?
Yeah, I think a little bit in cars.
Please, you first.
I also see, I'll try and leave autonomous vehicles out of this answer, but even the way people interact with all sorts of devices, obviously the personal assistance and the voice interaction, it's all going to start to feel a lot more like Star Trek, I think, pretty quickly. And as, fairly complicated devices that people have to spend a lot of time interacting with and accurately conveying their intent, I think a lot of the AI speech recognition and control algorithms will have a big impact. And then, I haven't even touched on inside the company, what we do, engineering and manufacturing vehicles. AI will give us a whole array of tools that I think, I was trained as an engineer in 20 years, even 10 years, is going to have a completely different set of tools than what I worked my way up through engineering with.
Sure. I liken my look at the near future to, I think I'm in a Twilight Zone episode where some kids find a magical black box that's filled with answers and nobody knows how it works or who created it, except it can create more magical black boxes with answers. And then, let's see, the army gets a hold of it and then everyone starts hooking up the magical black box to, I don't know, military systems and cars and the like. It scares the heck out of me what we're doing with black box tech in the next few years, and that's what got us all excited. And I'll talk another time about the technology we're building in understandable AI because I just think it's so important to be able to see what's inside these algorithms that we're using day to day.
And I think it's a real issue as we look at it in autonomous vehicles even. We can't provide an explanation if an accident happens and said, well, we're not sure exactly why. The AI just told the car to do this and something unfortunate happened. So being able to unpack the AI somehow and be able to understand why it's doing what it's doing is going to be very important for some of these very safety critical applications.
And I've got a pitch for you on that, believe me. But I'd still rather have the I'm not quite sure why that AV crashed in that situation than I'm really sure that texting driver or that drunk driver is the reason that my parents died, right? Exactly.
Very true.
Let's talk a little bit about accountability. Mike, I know that you've been thinking a lot about what the right accountability model is in terms of why did an algorithm make that decision, who should be held accountable. There's been a big push lately for open source, so everyone can inspect how these networks work and how they learn what they learn. I know you have a different view on it, so what's your view on accountability and predictability of the algorithms?
Well, as also an engineer by trade, open source I think is amazing for building systems and getting a lot of inspection into them. That breaks down a little bit when you're talking about deep learning systems where the source code like TensorFlow is fully available, but what's actually going inside those billions of nodes that's simulating what a human brain might be doing with that data. All of you guys are open source, right? 23andMe has all of my source code. I have no idea what to get my wife for her anniversary at all, but I have her full source code. It's all right in front of me, but I can't predict her behavior at all. So the idea of saying, let's use, believe me, I can't. So using open source is sort of a metaphor for that'll make it transparent. I mean, it's already not working. And I think it's a great way to stifle innovation by little seed stage companies like us, who all we've got is our source code. That's our ability to get the money to be able to build products so that we can change the world. So open source, I think, is the wrong approach in AI.
So if open source is the wrong approach, what's the right approach?
Oh, gosh, accountability, right? And I think it'll come down to someday the accountability of if you have a choice between using a black box algorithm or one that has full auditability, and you as a company make a choice to just go with a black box, I don't care. We heard earlier today about folks who are, let's make the quickest, most expedient decision to increase user count, increase revenue. That's ideally not the only thing we'll hold people accountable for.
On the note of accountability, what guardrails and how is GM thinking about accountability?
So for GM, safety is our overriding priority. And if you were here when Secretary Chow was speaking, she said safety 5 or 6 times. I may say it as many times. And so it's really important as we develop these products. We're in a highly regulated industry, again, as you heard this morning from Secretary Chow. We expect that AI applications are also going to get regulated as they affect the safety of a vehicle. But as a company with 100 years of building vehicles behind us, we've got very well-established processes with lots of oversight to make sure the products we develop are safe before we deploy them.
And what type of impact would open source have on innovation, the innovations you're developing?
So open source for us is it's an interesting topic. It's one that we keep looking at. We think, for some of the same reasons, I wouldn't have said it exactly the same way Mike did, but his point, when we deploy these vehicles, we've designed them, we've engineered, we manufacture them, we have to be entirely accountable for them and liable for their performance. And so we need to have a very deep understanding of exactly what's going into those vehicles and how it's interacting with all the other systems in the vehicle. So I wouldn't say we're a big open source user yet, but it's something we keep looking at.
And when we talk about accountability, it goes hand in hand with regulation. Because I think when people get uncomfortable with an accountability model, there's always a reach to regulate. I think that overall, when you look at how regulation could play out in AI, it's going to play out on the world stage, probably on a country-by-country basis. What role do you think regulation should play in the development of AI and these technologies?
Do you guys face regulation much?
No, a little bit every now and then. And so to that point, I think it depends on where you're going to use the AI. As I said, if you're going to use AI in an autonomous vehicle, there are going to be regulations on the safety that's expected from that vehicle, as well there should be. I think other places that you use AI may have different regulatory answers.
Right, absolutely. And drawing video games is the example, right? It's okay if you don't understand what's going on in there. It just may not be as good of an experience. I think what I find interesting when you look at regulation of technology, in the games field, because I'm going to go back there, that's where I'm from, the PlayStation 2 was a military class export, right? We couldn't ship PlayStation 2 from the United States overseas because of its fabulous potential for military usage. Go figure that one out. It was a supercomputer, right? But we don't have any of that sort of export control on AI. And when you think about the narrowing gap we have as a nation in AI, it scares me a little bit to think of us treating game consoles as more valuable to the fabric of our sort of country and defense than AI.
A lot of the focus of the main stage today has been on workforce, how to make us more productive, overall how to evolve the workforce. What impact do you think AI is going to have on the workforce, both in the short term and the long term?
So it's a topic that obviously we could spend a whole conference on. As I said, in the short term, I expect that it's going to give us a whole lot more tools to do our jobs better. And it'll be an extremely competitive space on how companies adapt and then deploy AI. Longer term, it is going to change the nature of jobs. And we should be justifiably concerned about that and thoughtful about it, about what we're going to do about it. I think we have time to be thoughtful over the next few years on what we're going to do. And we need to, those people that are doing jobs that aren't going to be the same jobs going into the future, we need to think about what do we do to help them move to something else where they can have a new job.
Any thoughts on jobs?
I'm wildly uneducated in workforce retraining. I just know that there's the #1 job in North Carolina, where I'm from, is truck driving, and also in California, and also in Texas. So that's a big problem, and I don't think it's 30 years away, right? It's a lot sooner than that. What I'm more excited about is workplace support, finding ways to remove the cognitive bias from boring tasks, from repetitive tasks, from really important tasks that you probably shouldn't be making the decision about what to say on this panel when drunk the night before preparing for it, right? These are things you shouldn't do, and if you've got an AI to help you with that, maybe it'll save you from making some mistakes when you have your best you available all the time. We'll see.
Many people think that the AI development is going to become a race between the US and China. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think that plays out? Is there room for a duopoly?
No, there's not a room for a duopoly. I think if you look through history, there's not been any examples of a dominant superpower replaced by another superpower that ended up with harmonious coexistence.
So I think it's a very good point. I think China has a very clear objective. AI is one of the technologies laid out in their forward-looking Made in China 2025 plan. They, as a country, work very closely between industry and government, and we need to be cognizant of that. I think, to Mike's point earlier, although there may not be restrictions on specific AI technology, we're already seeing restrictions around autonomous vehicles being discussed, export restrictions, and so on. And so I think part of the answer to your question will depend on how does the international community decide to regulate or restrict the movement of this technology. It would be a pity to see, but it might happen.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll open it up to the floor for additional questions. I want to bring it back to you and how all of you use, or both of you, how do you use AI day in and day out? Do you have Alexas or Google Homes in your house? How often are you riding in self-driving cars? What are already the impacts in your daily lives?
So I do ride in the self-driving cars. They still have safety drivers, but I ride in them quite regularly. I do that because I know exactly where all that data is going and who's got it. I am not an Alexa or a Google Assistant user on a regular basis because I may be of the generation that is a little concerned about all this data freely flowing to companies about what I'm doing.
I do not have an AV, and I would love one. And so
I'm working on it.
You're the guy to talk to about that. That would be fabulous. So I do not ride around in an autonomous vehicle. It uses way too much gasoline, though. What I do...
We're going to make them electric, by the way.
That would be fantastic, yeah. So I separate my life, and at our work life, we don't even have Wi-Fi. Right, we have a security officer, our background is DoD, Intel community, and the like, and we treat AI like it's weaponizable because it is. And at home, I've got an Alexa and a Google in every friggin' room, because I've given up, right? I mean, there's kind of no way to avoid the fact. Raleigh is famous for having done a 1 million-person dragnet of Google Maps information and who was driving through Raleigh in a massive area to catch someone who had robbed a store with no court intervention, no warrant, just we don't know let's see who drove through Raleigh, right? And I can't stop using all of those devices that I very much am attached to, so therefore I've kind of just separate those lives. That's the easiest way for me to do it.
Okay, let's go to questions in the audience. And let's wait for the mics to get into you. And if you could stand up and give your name and who you're with.
Sure. Jitu Patel, I'm with Box. And a question for you at GM is, how long do you think it's going to be before fully autonomous driving vehicles with regulations passed? So my 75-year-old mother can be taken from her place to the grocery store is going to happen. Is it 5 years out? Are we 10 years out? Are we 15 years out?
So what we're working on is a autonomous ride-sharing fleet. So it'll operate in a big urban city, and there are economic reasons for that to get the ride density to make the business work. But we've announced we're going to deploy one of those fleets at scale in a city in North America next year without drivers. And so we expect to have our first city next year. Now again, I'll go back to the fact safety is the overriding priority, and that is the gating function. When we have achieved the level of safety that first convinces ourselves and then convinces our regulators that we're ready to deploy. But I expect that next year the technology will at least be available in one city, and then we'll see how fast it scales after that.
Raleigh.
And by the way, your 75-year-old mother represents a huge demographic of people that are going to see an enormous improvement in their quality of life with autonomous vehicles. So as a company, we're really looking forward to being able to use cars to help some of these folks that don't have good access to transportation today.
Well, that's a big milestone. When those cars are deployed next year, what will they look like inside?
So next year, what we're doing for the cars that we're currently developing AV on is we've taken the Chevy Bolt, which is an electric vehicle, and that's become the basis for our AV development. They look the same on the outside as a Chevy Bolt. They're about 40% new parts on the inside to get the cybersecurity that we're after in some of the AV systems and the redundancy. And so there won't be a lot of changes on the inside. Now, it came up this morning, if you happen to hear Secretary Chow, we have applied for an exemption to the current FMVSS requirements to remove the steering wheel and pedals. And we've got that vehicle all designed where we've taken those out and we put a fourth passenger seat in. But until we get the exemption granted from the Secretary, we can't deploy that. What I think will happen, though, back to the purpose-designed vehicles, you're going to see vehicles with all sorts of different interiors develop. Just like everybody's got all sorts of different rooms and different furniture that they like, I think people will get more and more demanding on how they want to ride.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, we have one here.
Hi, Julie Crable with Descartes Labs. I know you've talked a lot today about safety and about margins of error. We're obviously comfortable with human margin of error because we get in cars every day. How comfortable do you think people need to be with machine margin of error? Like, what does society have to get used to? We can't get to zero, I imagine.
So we're going to be able to prove in a statistically significant way that we're better than human drivers when we deploy. The tough part of your question becomes how much better than a human driver is society going to demand? And to be honest, there's no consensus on that. What I do think will happen after autonomous vehicles are deployed, though, is you're going to see Moore's Law start to operate on the compute platform and the sensors. Costs will start coming down very quickly, but very importantly, performance will go up. The other thing you'll see happen, of course, is as more cars get deployed and we get more learning and more experiences, the cars are going to continue to get safer and safer and safer. And that's in direct, that's completely different from human drivers who don't get any better over time. Arguably with distracted driving, we're getting worse. So we will be safer than human drivers, and I think quickly you'll see cars get significantly safer than human drivers.
I want to use our last few minutes here to just ask one broad question as sort of wrapping up thoughts. Because I think for some people, when they think about the impact of AI, they're very optimistic, and there's some who are very pessimistic. Where do you come down on that debate, in summary, to close the panel?
Me first? You sure? I should go first because I'm going to be depressing as hell.
Let's end on the more optimistic.
Yeah, what got me into this is I think there's only so many different opportunities we have for extinction level events, and I think AI is one. The average AI scientist thinks that we'll have artificial general intelligence by 2040, and my guess is that it's not going to be 15 years from where that 3-year-old child AI becomes an 18-year-old child, probably be 15 seconds. And so our whole mission is to build AI that's debuggable. So the crazy people who are running as fast as they can to find a way to monetize AI however they can are at least able to see what's going inside under the hood. So fingers crossed, go humanity. And you?
Well, I'm more on the optimist side.
Great, because I'm not riding your cars.
Well, and for all the reasons we've talked about, I think we have the ability to deliver not just autonomous vehicles, but an array of products that are really going to make people's lives better. We have to be cognizant, like many technologies, of what the potential downsides are, and we need to get a lot more thoughtful about how we think about that, because no new technology is completely without risk, but I'm optimistic that we'll figure our way through it.
Well, the one thing we know for sure is that one of the mics will be right. But I will hope that it'll be Mike Abelson with the optimistic view. But I want to thank both of you today for sharing your predictions and insights. It's been terrific. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's fun.